friend of mine once commented, he said, I don't know how you can listen to music and write at the same time. And I said, well, apparently I can't do it very well. uh, hmm. Anyway, tough crowd. So I was listening to this shuffle. I have phases through the day. If you've read Joy on Purpose, it probably won't surprise you, but I have all these little tricks to juice out more productivity from whatever I'm doing. And one of my tricks throughout the days tend to be long. I get up really early. I got up a little after midnight last night or this morning, whichever way you want to say it. It's almost 5 o'clock p.m. now. And so I implement these little micro phases during the day and change up the mood somehow. Like I'll put on a different kind of music, or I'll go eat a certain kind of snack, or I'll go take a shower. And then after that seems like a different time period to me. And it breaks up the day and helps me stay productive, even if I'm working on the same exact thing throughout the day. Anyway, so I was going through this part of my playlist as a part of that, and I listened to the song by the band Yes, and I think it's called. Actually, I have no idea what it's called off the top of my head, but the lyric that hit my mind was, "Hear the calling of a miracle." And I think I wrote a blog post once with that title, with some thoughts that occurred when I listened to this song years ago at some point, and I don't have any recollection of what that post was about. But as I relit the wood stove a couple of minutes ago, I was thinking about that and how different it would be if the lyric was hear the crawling of a miracle, the crawling of a miracle. And where my brain went with that was, you've probably heard the phrase, faith precedes the miracle. Miracles are performed through faith. But actually, a whole lot precedes a miracle. And one of the things that precedes a miracle is a procession of getting to know God better and acting more like Him. In fact, the path to miracles can be quite long. And isn't it interesting when you think about the Lord and how little we have about Him in the New Testament, about His life, about His mortal life? Have you ever wondered what preceded His ability to perform these miracles? Now, there are all kinds of weird apocryphal texts and paintings of Him as a baby throwing up gang signs and performing these crazy miracles as a little baby. But the truth is, He didn't do any of that. I should be careful and not be so bold in saying any of that. But I'll refer you to the account of the wedding at Cana, which occurred before He really kicked off His public ministry. And He told His mother, when His mother obviously was expecting Him to do things, which presupposes that He did something. Somehow she knew that He was capable of doing things, and so she had observed enough. But He said, my time has not yet come. And so He was intentionally not doing things in public, which is interesting. But anyway, the point is that there was a backstory, and we don't have it in the scriptures. Now, why is that? So we read, Jesus said something like, a prophet is not without honor except in his own country and among his own kin. Why is that? In my house, every time I say, why is that, one of my kids will do their impression of Kip from Napoleon Dynamite. That's a line in the movie. Why is that? When he's talking to Uncle Rico. So why is that? There are at least two big ways that we judge incorrectly when it comes to sizing up other people. The first way, which I think we think about more often, is that we appraise the value of what we see incorrectly. Meaning, we'll see something that's positive and we'll appraise it as having low value. Or we see something that's negative and we appraise it as not being as negative as it is. So maybe it's positive and we say it's more positive than it is, or less positive than it is, or it's negative and we think it's less negative or more negative. That covers the bases on that. But there's another way, and that's a big deal, by the way. It's very important to make those appraisals more accurate. But there's another way, and this is actually super duper important. And that is our ranking of things. Now, what do I mean by that? So think of what we were just talking about. You see these things about a person, and you say, this is good, and it's good by this much. This is bad, and it's bad by this much. Now we could be totally wrong about that. We might actually incorrectly see something as negative that's actually very positive even, or vice versa. But that's still that first category of error. The second thing, which is what I'm trying to draw attention to right now, is how we prioritize those things. We know that the Lord does many great things through small things, which means that they're not actually small. It's just our perception incorrectly sees those things as small, but they're actually huge. And a lot of times we can make a mountain out of a molehill, and we can make a molehill out of a mountain. How is this a prioritization question, at least in the way I'm trying to attack this? When you try to size someone up and you see some quality that they have, or something they do, or something they don't do, or the way they do something, I don't like the tone that you're using, that kind of thing, right? You're actually prioritizing that against a whole bunch of other things. That's actually a good example, that whole tone police thing. There's an old Cheap Trick song called The Dream Police. Maybe they should have made it The Tone Police. The Tone Police. Anyway. So when someone says, I don't like the tone that you're using, and they get upset about that, is the tone the point? No, the point is what is being said, the information value of what is being said. So extensively that if you're in an argument with someone and they pull the tone card, it means you've won. If that's their complaint, it means they don't have a logical counter argument to what you're saying. That's a ranking problem. Do you see what I'm talking about here with this specific example of the class of problem that I'm talking about? What it means is they have prioritized the tone of what is being said above what is being said, because if they maintain the correct ranking, they would say something like, oh, I've never thought of that before, or you might be right, or give me some time to think about that, or any number of these actual logical counter arguments that signal I'm listening to what you're saying and you have a valid point, and or I don't have a valid counter argument. And then you could go to, by the way, there's probably a better way of saying that, which is fair. It's like, okay, well, I think you're right. Yeah, actually, thanks. You're right. Or you could get a little sassy and say, well, that's irrelevant. It might be true, but it's irrelevant. So again, it's a prioritization problem. Is there another example of this? Oh yes, open your scriptures. You'll find the New Testament full of prioritization problems where people were judging Jesus. And they're like, hey, it's real nice you just raised this guy from the dead, but I don't like the fact that you don't wash your hands before you eat. Or, wow, yeah, you just miraculously produced all this bread and fish, and no one has ever done anything like that, but I don't like the fact that you're criticizing our church leaders. We don't do that. Do you see the prioritization problem? There are many, 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 many examples of this. There are so many examples of this that if you randomly pick out a specific verse and you read the verse before it and after it, you've probably got an example on your hands from the New Testament. Prioritization problems. Okay, what does this have to do with a prophet is not without honor except in his country and among his kin? Why don't we have the backstory of Jesus? The crawling of a miracle. Why don't we have that? So, the phrase, you have to crawl before you walk. You have to crawl before you walk with the Lord. Just run in your head through examples of prophets. Let's pause on Jesus. I don't want to say let's set him aside, but let's pause on him and let's think about his servants. Do we have the backstory of Moses? Not really. You can watch a movie about it, but it's pretty much all made up. We don't have the backstory of Moses. And he lived an entire life before he was called as a prophet of God. Amos was a shepherd. Not sure how old he was, but when God called him, he said, "I'm just a shepherd. What are you doing?" That's not a quote, but a paraphrase. David, another shepherd. He thought he was an outcast in his family. His dad didn't like him very much. His dad preferred all of his brothers to him. Sent him to go off with the sheep. David spent countless hours, countless days, weeks, months, maybe even years, practicing on his sling. As we know, he was out there for a long time because he became such a crack shot. And he had all this time to not only get good, but to get good enough to kill a bear and to kill a lion. That's how he learned what he needed to know to go kill Goliath. He didn't know that he was going to be a prophet, a priest, and a king one day. That was God's plan for him. And it wasn't that God plucked him out from being a shepherd to do this totally different thing. The sling throwing is the connection here. The entire time God was training David to be a prophet, a priest, and a king. David thought he was being trained to be a shepherd. His dad probably thought that he was being trained to be a shepherd, but that was not God's path. Amos wasn't being trained to be a shepherd. And we could go through, Moses wasn't being trained to be the prince of Egypt or the leader of the Pharaoh's armies, the general over the Pharaoh's armies. He spent a whole lifetime doing those things, but that's not what he was being trained to do. And we could go on and on with other people, other examples of this. Gideon was so surprised when the Lord called him to lead his army. But he wasn't just sitting doing random things his whole life. God was preparing him in a way that Gideon didn't know. He uses these things in normal life to prepare us to serve him more fully, to do more in his kingdom. And just as we can make mistakes in how we rank these things, in sizing up other people, we can and do make the same mistake in seeing the Lord's hand in our own lives. So you can probably put the pieces together in how to apply this to mistakes that we make in judging other people. But let's talk about how we can get out of God's way so he can more effectively train us for futures that we cannot accurately anticipate. It's beyond our capability for now. We'll know when we get there. How do we get out of his way so he can train us more effectively for what is to come that exceeds our expectation? Do your best. Do your best in whatever you do. In scriptural parlance, don't do anything without praying to God. But in all that you do, think about what Jesus himself would do in your shoes. Not as Jesus, but as you. If he came down and somehow took over your body in your exact same situation, your same hairline and shirt and everything, he just took over like you're a robot. If he took you over like a remote control drone, what would he do in your place right now? What would he do in your place at work right now? What would he do in your home? What would he do going out with your friends? Would he go out with your friends? Would he tell them to get lost? Would he tell them, I don't know, something a lot nicer? Maybe your friends are really good people. And on and on and on. When you're sitting in a red light, what would he do? Because God can use every single one of those things as your backstory in your path to do more in his service, to do more in loving other people, as he would in your place. Because we need this time that we have to prepare for each day. I wish that there was a way that I could pluck out of my head and my heart the confidence that I have that every single moment of every single day is so valuable. This sense of value in every moment. It's precious. It's a precious gift. And for some reason, we don't think about that, usually until either someone we love or ourselves face some horrendous trial where we lose some major component of our agency, of our ability to think, to speak, to walk, to whatever the thing is, to operate without massive pain, whatever it is. We lose somebody. And then we think about the opportunities that we have. I was in a restaurant a while back, a couple months ago, with one of my sons. And suddenly I wasn't there. And it was as if my son was dead, which is a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing. And instantly I was back. And the Lord said, it was a super, super intense emotional experience. Right there in a Wendy's, right? And I'm trying to hold it together because these crazy things can happen to you. If you let the Lord show you things, he will show you. And he spoke to me. And he said something like, if you knew your son was going to be gone tomorrow, what would you do differently now? And my answer was, I wouldn't do anything differently, except be so much more grateful for this moment. And I was as grateful as if he would, that the next day he was lost. And I was put in a time machine back 24 hours sitting there with my son, one last time. But every moment we have is that valuable. Every moment we have. So don't think that just because you're sitting at work for 8 or 9 or 10 hours, or you're driving to work for 40 minutes, or you're sitting on the toilet, it doesn't matter. Don't limit the value that God can flow through every moment, because every moment is your backstory for the things that are ahead, for the things that you can't even imagine yet. And you don't have to believe in crazy things to understand the truth of what I'm saying. Look at your own life to this point. Cut it up any way you want. You pick an event from your life, and you can look back through the years. Some of us have more years than others. And you can look back through the years and make the list of all the things that prepared you for that moment. And it's not something we think about. This isn't a way that we think. And maybe that's a good thing. It can be kind of intense. But make the most of every moment. And as you look out at other people, always understand that our view of the value of certain qualities can be really messed up and really wrong. But furthermore, the ranking can be wrong. And that can matter a lot. Again, now we come full circle back to the Lord. How much did it matter to get that ranking right, that priority order? And the main reason this matters is because of the first thing. It's so likely that we're so wrong about so much that we better have the ranking right. And at least if we get the biggest things right, we have a chance of doing the right thing, of seeing things correctly, of treating people correctly, as God would in our place. These are really important topics. I hope that you watch this again and you try to process these things and think about how you can apply them to your own life.